Hi there, welcome back to China Manufacturing Decoded. I've got a special episode with you today, and I'm joined once again by our reliability testing expert. Do you like that, Andrew? Andrew Amanovin?
That's a great start, Adrian. Good to be here again. Thank you very much for the cool introduction. Well, actually today we want to be discussing UL compliance. It is
Yeah.
something that I think at least some of our listeners may benefit from because of the fact that compliance in general is so complex and so confusing to many that I think hopefully, we can answer some of the questions that our listeners may have about UL compliance in general.
Yeah, and UL being one of the very important certifications that people need to get for quite a lot of the products that we work with, for sure, right?
Yeah, exactly. As you know, UL stands for Underwriters Laboratories. It's a US-based company. It's been in business for many, many years. And their specialty is pretty much on product safety.
Hmm.
And, a lot of people may wonder whether or not, their product actually requires UL or not. And this is something that we can discuss in this episode.
Yeah.
One of the things that I might use an example here, if you guys remember Samsung Note 7, the battery explosion that was happening with their phones, that is probably one of the best examples of safety related issue with an electronic product. So, for example, I would say if you have a lithium ion battery used in product, or you intend to plug that device into AC, outlet, you probably need to do UL safety. I would say that's probably the biggest advice I can give. On the other hand, it's very important for our audience to understand and realize that UL actually is for US as a country, not for other countries. However, some other countries may benefit from UL safety testing. Now, for US, UL is not required and is not mandatory. On the other hand, as you know, Adrian, you might be selling your product to retailers such as Amazon and Walmart. Then most of these retailers in America, they require UL certification if your product could pose some kind of a safety. For example, it has lithium ion in the product, and or it's a type of product that, for example, circuit breaker, or power supply, a kind of product that you have to plug into the wall, or an adapter. All of those basically require UL certification by most of the retailers in US.
Yeah, so just being cynical for a moment, is this because these big corporations are extremely worried about consumer safety, or is it rather more for their liability?
Yeah, it's more for the second, for the liability. They really don't want any of these products to pose a safety hazard where they could be, sued for that purpose.
Right, okay. So far where we're at then, UL, Underwriters Laboratory, is a battery of testing that any importer who is getting, sounds like consumer electronics mainly are the sort of products that we're probably working with on clients that would require UL. So it's going to be electronic products that could pose a safety risk, which is anything with power, really, that, if it plugs into a mains outlet, of course, there's a risk of fire or electrocution if things go really wrong, right? So It's these kinds of products that are going to require UL certification if you want to sell it in the USA, probably because you're likely to be selling through some sort of platform or to vendors who will demand it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I
Okay.
know that UL certification is very, very expensive. I mean, it can cost anywhere from, for example, $5,000 for a test up to $50,000 or more. I know that we had one big project, a huge power station for, for a home, and the actual UL certification was over $100,000.
Wow. Okay.
So, on the other hand, if you don't do this sort of UL certification, there are a couple of risks in here. One is that if there are truly safety hazards associated with your product that you don't know of, and then if it really does happen, fire, explosion, or anything that could actually hurt people or property, you could be liable in a massive amount of lawsuit. And I think honestly nobody wants that if you are trying to sell a product. And the other thing is that in some cases UL certification is a must. For example, electrical products, the kind of products that you plug into AC. It's pretty much any of the retailers will pretty much not buy it from you at all. As soon, in fact, you may not be able to even import it to that country because of the retailer's request to show UL certification documentation. And so it's very important that I think that one of the things that you might want to do is right up front, if you're going to be selling to a particular retailer, check or ask the retailer whether or not your product and your product type requires UL certification. You don't want to wait too long, and then here it is, you're about to ship the product, and all of a sudden you need UL certification. That would really not be good.
Well, that brings me on to asking about because you mentioned it's very, very costly, or it can be quite costly, right? Or very costly. I'm assuming this is because as part of the certification, there are actually quite a lot of tests. It's not just one or two tests. There's a whole bunch of them, right? So that obviously adds to the costs. And also you've got the time aspect as well. So let's say you had to do it in a hurry. I mean, realistically, it's not even possible to do it quickly.
Yeah, it really isn't. So I'm glad you brought that up. So let's say you have a product that is plugged in the wall and you need UL certification. You're probably looking at, I mean, if it's a really small item, you're probably looking at anywhere from a couple of $1,000 to $5,000 at the least to get the UL testing going. And you probably need anywhere from 1 to 5 samples per test if there is 1 or 2 tests required. And then you probably looking at 3 to 4 weeks of testing period lead time.
And that's just a small, quite simple product. I mean, for a larger product, so you mentioned one that we'd worked on as a project at a Gillian earlier on. So that was a large sort of battery pack for home use, right? So for this type of product, you're not talking about a couple of tests and needing, a handful of samples. How many sort of tests are involved in that?
Yeah, so this product, for example, is actually a very big inverter that takes your lithium ion. We're talking very huge, very big lithium ion. For example, 2 kilowatt hour type of power. That takes that and turns it into AC with an inverter, and then maybe some extra power that remains and actually converts it to grid line. So back to the grid basically. So this kind of a what you might call it power station in your house. So you really are not requiring to use the grid you're using this. You're charging it up, and you're basically using this for everything in the house. So this kind of a system is very dangerous if it's not tested by UL for safety. You're talking huge lithium-ion battery that if it explodes, I mean, basically burns down the whole house.
Yeah.
And then the testing that has to go through is very, very complicated, and it's not just one test. And then you have to combine these tests with a whole bunch of other unrelated to UL tests like FCC and some other country related compliance tests. So once you put all of these together, not only UL test itself could be over $50,000 or so, but then some other tests that you combine, the total compliance test for a unit like that could be in the order of 100,000 or more. But then the good side of the thing is that you only do that one time for your product, and the whole purpose of it is to come up with a label that has your UL listing. That means that you could go to UL website and actually put that registration number in the UL, and you will get to see your product is UL approved.
Okay. Yeah, that's clear. And I suppose with a larger product, it's going to be economies of scale. Listeners are probably thinking, wow, over $100,000 of compliance and safety testing. That's crazy. Yeah, it's a lot of money, but I suppose for these big ticket items, if you sell enough of them, it becomes, relatively affordable, I suppose, or a relatively affordable. Would we call it an NRE cost?
Not really, because NRE costs are something that has to do with cost of designing and manufacturing that product. On the other hand, this testing has nothing to do with us. It's really more of an import and export test that it's a requirement by the country and all retailers. So it's nothing. We don't get actually any benefit from that. So it's definitely not an NRE.
Right, but it's a relatively affordable cost that is necessary if you want to sell the product.
Yeah, on the other hand,
right.
Maybe I take it back. On the other hand, some may say, yeah, that is NRE. Basically, it's a one-time cost. You could look at it that way also.
Okay, that's kind of what I meant. Okay. You mentioned that it's something that you only need to do once, and that's true. However, if you then go and make an iteration of the product, so you've launched your product, it's being sold on the US market, it's UL compliant, and then you're making version 2. And version 2 is probably relatively similar, but it's going to have some differences. Do we have the same certification?
Very good question. So let me answer that in two parts. Let's say you have version 1 and you have already gone through the UL certification and you paid $50,000. And then all of a sudden, the engineering decided that, hey, before you go to full production, we're going to make some minor changes, change some components, do some cost reduction, change one of the components to a better component or a different type. Well, you just voided the whole, UL test that you had done before, and you have to do the whole thing all over again and come up with another 50,000. So that's one very important thing for our listeners. The second that you mentioned, a second version of your product, naturally the second version has gone through design changes, and the form and fit and the function might be different than the first version. Definitely requires UL testing again. Even if it was the same product, but some new features has been added, maybe everything looks the same from outside, but internally and feature-wise, some items have been changed, again, requires whole new UL testing.
Right. Okay. Good to know. And actually, if I remember, let's just go back a moment to when you know that you need to do the test, because you were talking about you don't want to end up finding out at the last minute that you need to do this sort of testing to make sure that you're compliant with UL or indeed any kind of certification that's required. Amazon, for example, they've got a lot of literature online that explains what's required, for example, and I'm sure all of the big retailers are the same. So it is possible to find out in advance. But I mean, from your perspective, typically, when do you normally find that importers are needing to do this kind of testing for UL certification?
Yeah, that's one of the questions that most of our clients ask us. When is a good
Right.
time to do the UL testing? Well, the best time to do it is when the prototype stage has completed. You have a functioning, working product that is pretty much the design has been locked in, uh,
Yep.
and you're just about to go full production with this particular design. So you're not
Mm.
thinking about making any changes. You're about to go to full production. That is the best time to go for UL certification. And some companies, what they will do is that if they're pretty sure that their product is going to pass and no issues, they may take a chance and risk and go and do UL testing in parallel with the production start. On
Right.
the other
Okay.
hand, most companies, what they will do is that they will actually go with, um, typically, they will start with very small sample size in production, and they use those sample size for verification and validation purpose by
Mm.
engineering teams, reliability, and some other. And then while the teams are reviewing the product and validating the product, the UL certification is actually happening. And then once all of this data comes in, UL passed, validation passed,
Hmm.
verification passed, and the engineering and reliability test passed, then the full
Hmm.
production starts.
And I suppose the benefit of doing that, because this is interesting to understand the flow, because it's not like you have your prototype ready that is it's basically a production model but in prototype form before mass production starts, and then everybody just stops for several weeks while UL certification or other testing and validation gets done. There's different things going on at the same time. So uh, what you're describing is essentially then a pilot run. So I suppose one of the other benefits from this is when you do have the green light to start mass production, you've also got your learnings from the pilot run about how well the manufacturing processes are standing up to the needs that you're going to have when you start producing in larger quantities.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Mm.
It's very important and critical, pretty much, that you are sure that you're not going to have any safety issues related to your product before you
Mm.
actually go to mass production. Because generally, as you know, you push the button in the production, you'll be producing a whole bunch of product by the end of the day. In one day, depending on what the product is, you could be hundreds to thousands of units of product could be produced. And if those don't comply with the safety or UL safety, then basically most of them could be scrapped. And the cost
Yeah.
of doing something out of the process is just, not a good thing.
Yeah, you're talking about manufacturing issues. So the design may be sound, the engineering side of everything, and the product has been tested and validated, but then there's some unforeseen manufacturing issue that's happening once the products are being made on the line, and that's causing them to not be compliant and therefore unsafe.
Yes, exactly. One of the things that I think our clients ask us all the time, well, I don't have a lot of money. My product is just very small battery. I really
Mm.
don't want to do UL. What should I do? So here are some of the recommendations, although we don't, uh, I guess we're not suggesting that you should be doing this, but these are some ideas that may help you in trying to either reduce your cost in doing UL testing, and or maybe save some time, because UL testing costs takes sometimes a whole month. In big ticket items, it could take several months. So it depends on that. But here are some ideas what you can do to avoid doing UL. For example, instead of you creating or designing and building the power adapter for your product, then the best thing to do is just buy and purchase a UL certified power supply or power adapter from a supplier. That means that supplier has already UL tested their product. They have UL certification, and you are buying a product that is already UL certified, so you don't have to do that. So that's
a good idea.
Yeah, I would say that's tip number one. And then tip number two would be, for example, let's say this product has to go to a wall socket. Again, make sure the wall socket is UL certified already from the vendor or the supplier, so you don't have to deal with that. Okay. The third tip would be, well, if possible, if your product can actually work with a USB, meaning that charge via USB, then you should use a USB charger as opposed to basically USB powered charger. So this way, all the adapters can be UL certified by the supplier, and your device is actually basically being powered by USB. And this way, you don't have to worry about any kind of a UL certification for your product as far as the power goes.
Good tips.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important tips. In some cases, you might try to say, not do UL, kind of take a chance or risk, because UL is not mandatory in US, and you are not selling to any retailers. So, for example, you are selling online, okay, and you're not going to be selling to for a whole corporation in a mass order. So individuals are going to come to your website, and they're just going to buy one or two of your items. And in those kind of situations, it's up to you. There might be a chance that you may not need UL certification, as long as there is no obvious safety hazard from your product for the users. Again, this is not a suggestion or recommendation from our side. It is just something dependent on your product. You need to discuss with your engineering and UL technicians or UL labs, and then see what they recommend for your product. But it is something that you can consider.
Yeah, you got to weigh it up. Okay, good. And I suppose for everybody at the back, just for one more time, let's just quickly summarize by just going back over why. Why is UL such an important certification?
Yeah, I think that in conclusion, I would say UL is extremely important because of the fact that its focus is safety. And safety can come in so many ways. It's not always explosion. It could be chemicals. It could be hazardous materials. It could be just lead, in the paint. I mean, simple things like that. And it's really, I think that it's not only a good conscious type of thing. If you are a supplier or a product owner and you want to sell it in a product, and let's say you have a toy and it's got lead in it. I mean, how can you sell a product with the lead in it to any product, even if you can sell it on your website? It's irresponsible. So you definitely want to make sure that with good conscience, if you believe that there are any kind of a risk of safety of any kind, fire, explosion, chemical hazards, lead, or poisonous materials, then definitely go through the UL certification. It's just for good conscience. And then
right. So from a product point of view, we specifically help out clients with UL certification who oftentimes are creating electronics, but actually from a product niche point of view, it's not only electronics, it could be all sorts of products.
Yes, exactly. And you're right. We help a lot of our clients who not only give us the whole product for designing and manufacturing it, but also they want us to take control of and get in all the compliance tests done for them, all the reliability tests done for them. So in doing so, we make sure that not only we work with reputable labs so that their product is UL tested or FCC tested or any kind of a compliance needs that they have, so that their product is going to be sold in that country without any issues related to compliance. But at the same time, we try wherever possible to recommend what's needed, what's not needed, answer our clients' questions, and in doing so, we try to save them time and money as well.
So this is true DFX work then. So in this case, we're talking about sort of design for compliance. It may be that there are suggestions that can be made that are able to improve how easily the product can comply, while at the same time there's going to be a manufacturability aspect to it and all the rest of the different design optimizations that can be made.
So yeah, that's exactly right. So a lot of our clients are not an expert in compliance, and they have a lot of questions, and most don't have time to go and do research, don't know which lab to talk to. A lot of times these labs are in China that we deal with, so they don't speak any English, and our clients don't know which lab to go to. We know what they need. We try and answer most of their questions to the best of our knowledge based on our experience with the products dealing with either UL or FCC or any other compliance. But at the same time, if they have a very tough question that is very serious and it could cause issues for them if we don't answer, we make sure all of their questions are answered by a reputable lab who are an expert in doing compliance testing.
Yeah, and that's a good point, right? Because we have our own testing lab, which is quite comprehensively equipped with cutting edge testing equipment. But when it comes to UL certification, for example, actually you do need to use a lab that is on UL's list of accredited labs, right?
Yeah, good point, actually. So UL has a lot of labs across the world that are UL certified labs, basically. And these labs will do UL testing on behalf of UL, basically.
Yeah, so it's not something you can do yourself. You have to go to them in order to have
you absolutely must. You absolutely have to go through them, because only they are UL approved labs. Any other lab is not authorized to issue any kind of UL certification.
But that doesn't mean that you can't start preparing your product to comply with UL's demands before you even engage that lab. And in fact, I don't know. How common is it for a UL lab to give you that sort of feedback? I think their job is to do the testing and validation, right?
Actually, that's a very good point. So if you have a very complicated product and you want to do some UL screening and you don't need any kind of certification, there are plenty of labs that can do UL level testing, but they're not authorized to give certification. So yes, you could utilize some of their services to pre-screen for UL certification. And then once you're sure that it's going to pass, then you have to actually switch and go with a UL authorized UL lab that can actually issue certification as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's all clear, Andrew. And I think that you've given everybody food for thought, especially if you are selling into the US market on this occasion and you are producing a product that could be in any way a safety hazard. And we all know that compliance and consumer safety are thorny issues, which, just the thought of a lawsuit or something like that, it's enough to break everyone out into a cold sweat, isn't it? So this is why UL, which concerns safety in particular, is so important. So that's a really great introduction to why and how to comply with UL and what UL is. And I appreciate you coming on to share that with us, Andrew.
Yeah, my pleasure, Adrian, and looking forward to meeting you next time.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share because it will really help others discover us too.